Welcome to Life Group. Welcome to the Covenant with David. We've been looking at these covenant promises of God, from his covenant with Noah and Abraham, and then his covenant with Israel, and now we're here in this covenant with David. In these previous covenants, we've seen a pathway or a runway leading to the person of Jesus found in these covenants. That in the covenant with Noah, sin is real and God's judgment against sin is real. But he sets his judgment aside for a time so that salvation can be accomplished. In the covenant with Abraham, God makes these promises to Abraham and Abraham's family, promises of a great family, a great nation, of land, and ultimately a promise that the whole world will be blessed through Abraham's family. And we see that in the person of Jesus. In God's covenant with Israel, God walks with Israel and gives them direction on how they can live in relationship with him. And ultimately, it's found out that the people of God and all of humanity can't do things on their own, that they can't live in relationship with God of their own accord. Instead, they need somebody to pay the price for them, to sacrifice themselves for them. And we see that in the person of Jesus. And then here in the covenant of David, we get kind of one more piece of this salvation picture. And so it's super interesting, and I enjoy this story immensely. And so Israel has come out of Egypt, walked through the wilderness, have entered into the promised land, and have been living without a king for some time. And God in the books of the law said, I will be your king. I'm your king. And Israel decides, once they're in the promised land, that they want a king, just like all the other nations around them. And so Israel goes to God, and God gives them ultimately Saul. And Saul looks so much like the kings of the nations around them. He acts like them. He physically looks like them. And ultimately, Saul fails as king because he doesn't trust God. He doesn't trust God's direction or what God asks him to do. And so God removes Saul as king and eventually establishes David as king over the nation of Israel. David establishes a great nation. He is known as a man after God's own heart. And we see this kind of play out in this covenant. David's not without his faults. He has many of them. But here in this covenant promise, we kind of see David's heart for God. David is living in the city of Jerusalem, and as he's living in the city of Jerusalem, he's living in his palace, and he realizes that the ark of God, the ark of the covenant that we have heard about in the Old Testament, is not dwelling in a house. Instead, it is dwelling in a tent. And David comes to this realization, and he decides, I'm going to build a house for God to dwell in, the Ark of the Covenant. I'm going to build a house for this thing to dwell in. And he goes to the prophet Nathan, and Nathan kind of says, that sounds like a great idea. And then that night, Nathan is awoken, and the word of the Lord comes to Nathan, and God tells Nathan, no, that's not what I want. And in fact, in chapter 7, verse 11, kind of the back half of verse 11, we hear God's voice speaking to Nathan that he will then tell David. He says, moreover, God is speaking, the Lord declares to you that the Lord will make you a house, David. You're not going to make me a house. I will make you a house. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. And he shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. God promises David that his descendants will reign on the throne for all of eternity. And we see that as like a furthering of the promise of Abraham, that all of the nations of earth will be blessed through your family. And now we understand in the covenant with David, that promise to Abraham, it is fulfilled in the line of David, and it's fulfilled not just as a random blessing, but is fulfilled in the coming of a king that will reign for all of eternity. That David's sons will reign on a throne that lasts for eternity. Now, we know, if we know anything about the Old Testament, that the kings that come after David, his sons in his line, fail miserably. In fact, they are eventually exiled out of the promised land, and they're never really established again as another great nation. There's not another king that comes into place until God, in his great timing and God in his great wisdom, sends Jesus to come and to die on behalf of the whole world, so that if they place their faith in him, salvation will be accomplished in their lives, and that he will reign on the throne for all of eternity. God's promises are true. His promise to Abraham is fulfilled in the person of Jesus, and it's fulfilled through the line of David in the person of Jesus. He sends Jesus to bless the whole world, and he sends Jesus to reign as king for all of eternity over our hearts and over our lives. So my prayer this week, as you engage with this text, as you discuss things, is that God opens your heart wide to him, but also reveals the spots in your life where you haven't allowed Jesus to be king over parts of your life. And that God would convict you, and that you would turn those things over to him. Because God wants to be in relationship with you. He's made a way for that to happen in the person of Jesus. And he wants to rule and reign for all of eternity. And he will. Take time to read through this passage. Take time to pray together, to discuss things together, and enjoy your time in your life groups. Thank you, guys.